You are listening to We Saw the Devil, an investigative and conversational true crime podcast that deep dives into fascinating criminal cases that are solved, unsolved, or ongoing. From America's Lori Vallow to Germany's Armin Meiwes, we examine and discuss the world's most shocking cases. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to follow us online. Check us out at WeSawTheDevil.com and We Saw the Devil on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And don't forget, you can become part of the show by backing us on Patreon. Hello everyone, you are listening to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin, and I am here with a news update episode. And in these episodes, I like to cover highlights from the news from the last week and a half, things that you might not be aware of, because so much happens in this country, in the world for that matter, on a daily basis. It's very easy for happenings and movements to get kind of lost in the shuffle. Everything from forward motion in cases that we never thought would be solved, to sentencings, to, unfortunately, as we saw this past week, yet another mass shooting. So I would like to cover a couple of these events. Before we get into that, again, you're listening to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin. Check out the website at WeSawTheDevil.com. From there, you can find us easily across all social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, so forth, as well as our Patreon, where if you're digging the show, want to financially back it, you can do so there as well. The next episode this week will be coming out on Friday. That one will be part 2 in the Dark Side of Disney series. I hope you enjoyed episode 1, kind of a history of the technical side and how cameras and movie cinema in general developed in the early 1900s. It's one of my absolute favorite topics personally, and I hope you found it interesting, but it's a very, very important key when discussing Disney, when discussing what cinema was like at that time. Wait until I get to the movie premiere of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. It's mind-blowing because it's not at all what we think of when we think of classic Disney. So I'm really excited for Friday's episode to drop. That'll come hopefully when you're fat and sassy after you have an awesome Thanksgiving meal. You're laying around the day after and kind of like a turkey drunk or whatever food drunk stupor that you're in. Feel free to listen to We Saw the Devil. That is if you're not going out there Black Friday shopping, which I hope no one is out there, going Black Friday shopping. My heart, if you are a retail worker, my heart bleeds for you. When I was a kid, I worked at Michael's and we worked on Black Friday. And guys, that was hell. That was absolutely hell. People tried to take vacations like a year prior to Black Friday, and that entire week was just marked out on the calendars. Working it was absolute hell. Of course, that's when Michael has the best framing deals. Don't you dare get any ideas. And, I worked checkout. I'm getting a little verklempt just thinking about it because it was just so awful. So, that being said, if you want to skip out on that, do like I do. Head over to Twitter, type in hashtag Black Friday, and watch people fight over $3 toasters. I never claimed to be a good person, so if that's somehow distressing to you, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you, but it's the biggest statement on society, I think, every single year, watching people literally get into fistfights and brawls over a toaster that is discounted by like $2. And sadly now, with inflation and job losses and everything else, I just simply cannot imagine. That being said, on a happy note, I hope all of you have a wonderful, safe Thanksgiving. You're able to spend it either with friends, family, and that you feel loved, most of all. Beyond that, guys, if you're digging the show and you are enjoying it, please just take 5 seconds out of your day, leave a 5-star review on iTunes, Stitcher, whatever platform you're listening to this on. It means the world to us content creators and lets us know that you enjoy what we do. Think of it as a little vote of support. But let's go ahead and get into it, guys, because we have a couple different things that I would like to cover here. First and foremost, the Delphi Murders update. I'm just going to go ahead and apologize in advance if you get sick of this case. Right when I founded my podcast, the Lori Vallow case hit. I'm talking like 3 episodes in. And I covered it rabidly. I mean, episode after episode after episode, to the point where I think that we partially became the Lori Vallow podcast. And that was never, ever, ever, ever my intention. The Delphi Murders was a case that I was always incredibly devastated by. It's one of those cases that I never in a million years thought would be solved. And then here we are in 2022, and not even about a month ago now, someone was finally arrested. And if you listen to my update episode on the Delphi murders, I, kind of went over loosely what happened in that case, the aftermath of it, what's happened over the last 5 years in terms of the search. There's just so much that I didn't even scratch the surface of or even touch on at all. And there are plenty of resources for that online. There's multiple subreddits, multiple Facebook groups. You will not be longing for information on this case if you want to go back and look at the history of it. So what I've been doing for the last week when I can is I've actually been going back down the rabbit hole to a lot of really early information, a lot of really early YouTube videos of people who walked down the bridge and walked down the hill. God, it feels so weird saying that, saying down the hill. I will never think of that phrase the same way in my entire life. Reacquainting myself with the geography of the case and what it looks like, and going back on old suspects and going back down the Klein rabbit hole a couple years ago when all of that mess happened. There's just so much with that case. It's not every single day that you come across a case where one of the victims who, 13 and 14-year-old little girls, one of them had the wherewithal, for whatever reason, to take out their cell phone and record a man walking towards them. And then the police would release audio from that man saying, "Guys, down the hill." The girls were found the next day, deceased in the woods. A lot of additional details. We are not going to cover them here. But Richard Allen, a 50-year-old resident of Delphi, was arrested for their murders last month. And some information has started slowly trickling out about him. In the Delphi episode that I did, I gave as much of a personal history of him that we had at that time. I believe still currently that's probably the most updated information that we have on him. But it just came out that he actually went to the conservation officer right after the girls' murders on February 13th of 2017. He admitted to them that he was on the Manon High Bridge that afternoon, but claimed and told the officer that he didn't see the two girls. Now, as we know, it is not uncommon for serial killers, whatever, to insert themselves into the case in some way. That has been seen time and time and time again. Richard Allen, who has been, again, arrested for this crime, apparently did the same thing the day of their murders when they were reported missing. He went and he said, "Yeah, I was there, but I didn't see them." And that statement to the conservation officer had apparently, supposedly, if you believe the official police version of events, which, let me just say right now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not saying that the police are lying. What I am saying is that there was a massive, massive crime in this community of like 3,000 people. And this man, Richard Allen, lived like a mile and a half from where the girls were murdered. Now, the fact remains that Richard Allen, who worked in the local CVS as a pharmacy assistant, that he was one of the people that day to admit that he was there. And the state police, the Indiana State Police, apparently have had almost no leads, like actual real fruitful leads, obviously, over the last several years. So per some sources close to police, they apparently got super frustrated that they weren't making headway, so they decided to revisit some of these details, like who was there and so forth. We don't know how they discovered that it was Richard Allen. We do not know how Richard Allen ended up being connected to this. What we do know is that investigators 100% believe that Richard Allen is the man on the bridge, or if you see online, BG or Bridge Guy. Also, the cell phone video of him. And, after seeing Richard Allen and his body type and makeup and structure, I can totally see how he would be Bridge Guy. There's also one video of him walking. I can't find it now, but I found it. I'll have to find an article on it. I would gladly post it on our Instagram. And his jeans fit the same way. He has kind of the same, weird kind of walk. So I can totally see that. Last week, Allen submitted a handwritten letter asking the Carroll County judge for a public defender. If you recall, initially, he supposedly was going to be hiring and paying for his own attorney. Well, that's not the case anymore. He finally said, "Hey, Carroll County judge, I need a public defender." So this past Monday, Andrew Joseph Baldwin from a Franklin, Indiana law firm and Bradley Anthony Rotzi of Logansport, they were added as public defenders for Allen. Anthony Rotzi is going to be the lead attorney, and then Andrew Baldwin is going to be the co-counsel. I assume at this point they have been poring over the probable cause affidavit. And guys, as luck would have it, there is a probable cause hearing tomorrow, or today, 11/22, Tuesday, And basically what's going to happen is the judge is going to hear arguments from both sides as to why the probable cause affidavit should be released to the public or remain sealed for however longer they determine. It sounds like the Indiana State Police, a couple of members of the media as well, obviously, but a lot of people are in support of this affidavit being publicized, being made, finally public. From what I've heard, media has already started to descend in Delphi in preparation for this tomorrow. It is going to be a huge ordeal, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. What I'm seeing a lot on the Reddit, YouTube, boards, things like that, people are still talking about Keegan Kline because the police have come out and said that there is no connection. I would also like to remind you that the FBI has confirmed directly, the FBI, that Keegan Kline is not attached to the Delphi murders at all. There was the entire speculation and kind of conspiracy that Keegan Kline, because he was in connection with one of the girls, that he lured the girls to the bridge, and then Richard Allen got onto the account and went and attacked them. There have been so many wild accusations thrown at this case, and 90% of them somehow involve Keegan Kline. And guys, I'm going to be completely freaking honest with you. I don't know why people don't want to admit it. I do, because it's a horrifying thought that there are just simply this many predators in the world. I was 13 years old when I was sent my first dick pic. I was on AOL. If that doesn't show my age, I don't know what does. But I was super, 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 super into guitar. Riot Girl bands like Bikini Kill, Hole, Babes in Toyland, Sleater Kinney, bands like that. And I was learning how to play guitar. And I started talking to this guy on AOL. Don't remember how I even started talking to him. It took like 4 months. And then finally he sent me a video on AOL of him masturbating. He was actually sending me like guitar tabs and showing videos of him playing guitar and different riffs from some of my favorite bands that I felt very empowered by. And then suddenly one day I received a video of him masturbating. I wake up every day and I am so beyond thankful that I do not have children. Almost every single friend that I have who has a child, a daughter in the very least, God, I think the youngest was like 11, before a grown man, a predator, sent her a picture of his penis or was grooming her. Some have met groomers on Discord. Friends have a 13-year-old daughter. I haven't talked to these friends in years, but their daughter actually ended up lying, skipping school, and going to meet one of these men. It was not good. Did not have a good outcome. They searched her computer, and she had actually been communicating with like 6 grown men, like 6 adults at 13. This is not an uncommon occurrence. And I know a lot of you ladies listening to true crime podcasts, I know you know that. A lot of people don't. As much as we don't want to believe that the girls are being groomed by a pedophile, and then simultaneously the same day, like an hour after they talked to this person online, were murdered by another man, unrelated. As much as we don't want to believe that, it appears at least, I hope I'm not speaking too soon, but based on what the police and FBI have both said, completely separate, unrelated events. Obviously, I'm not saying that every little girl is going to be, linked to a pedophile and then murdered later one day. But what I am saying is that there is a damn good chance, because I don't know a single woman who has not been the brunt of something online, whether as a child or an adult. It's likely that almost every young girl has had that experience in some way. Now, separately from that, what I would like to remind you, and something that I'm not really seeing discussed in a lot of places, the police confirmed shortly after the murders that they did in fact obtain DNA evidence from the suspect. Now, let's not forget that Richard Allen had no criminal records, so he wasn't in any sort of system, right? The police did revisit earlier suspects. They've done it throughout the entire investigation, but for some reason here in 2022, they decided to revisit him in particular. Now, let's just think for a moment. What other cases have we heard of that have used genealogy to get this type of information? Can you imagine if there was a hit in the system with the DNA related to the DNA that the police had? Someone finally took that Ancestry 23andMe test, whatever, and it linked back to Richard Allen or one of his immediate family members. If you recall, East Area Rapist, right? What if police got that link, got a search warrant, authorized to collect trash? Boom, DNA match. We simply do not know right now. We have no idea. But what I do know is that there is a hearing today to determine if we are going to be able to read this probable cause affidavit. If that does in fact happen, I will have a mini episode released tonight to go over that, and we can talk about this more in depth. If it does remain sealed, we're just going to wait. But this is going to be fascinating to see how it took 5 years for the police to arrest a man who lived 1.5 miles away from where the girls were murdered. Alrighty, so moving on, let's talk about this heinous case out of Idaho. So 2 Sundays ago, Moscow police received a call just before noon on that Sunday about an unconscious person at a King Road residence. When the police arrived on the scene, they found 4 people dead in the home on the 2nd and 3rd floors. There were 2 people on the 2nd floor, 2 people on the 3rd floor. This case has absolutely haunted the community. The victims' names were Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Kaylee Consalves. And they were stabbed to death. Apparently, something like this happened. The group arrived to the King Road home that they shared with 2 other roommates. So again, a total of 6 people living in this home. 2 girls lived on the 1st floor, 2 of the victims lived on the 2nd floor, 2 of the victims lived on the 3rd floor. They arrived home around 1:45 a.m. So the murder had to have taken place early in the morning. We don't know a terrible amount about the next day, the day of the discovery. We do know that a sliding glass door had been left open. And we do know that there were multiple other people, like other associates, friends of either the group or the 2 surviving roommates there that morning. Someone called the police to report an unconscious person from one of the surviving roommates' cell phones. And what police discovered when they came is that there were 4 victims in the house, 2 on the 3rd, 2 on the 2nd, and they had been stabbed to death. The county coroner, Kathy Mabott, said the manner of death was a stabbing for all 4. There was no evidence of sexual assault, and the police have since said that it appears to have been a combat knife. Like if you think of, say, the movie Rambo or something like that, one of those big combat knives that you would see like a Navy SEAL or someone using. Initially, right after this murder, the police said that they didn't believe that the community was in any danger. Like, what? We've seen college kids murdered before, Ted Bundy, and there's no suspect in custody. So how is the community not in danger? Olivia Gonsalves, the sister of victim Kaylee, said that police have no proof that this is an isolated incident and that anything is isolated until it isn't. And that was very, very, very well put on her part. It was an incredibly gruesome scene. Apparently, they were stabbed to death, likely while they were asleep. The 2 surviving roommates who were on the 1st floor did not hear anything. They slept through their roommates' murders. Police have cleared them and said they have nothing to do with any of this. I mean, my God, can you imagine how traumatized you would be? There are a couple photos that have been released from the news sources and news media. Not going to share them. One involves blood dripping down the outside corner of the home. So I can't fathom, nor do I want to fathom, what the inside of that home looks like if blood is splattered, dripping down the outside wall. What we do know so far, and this is fascinating, and if you have a moment, please Google this. There's a video from the investigation, and it's been released to the public, and it's of a food truck. Madison and Kaylee went to a bar that night, and then before returning home, they went to a food truck. Very, very busy. You see a lot of people in the CCTV footage. And then you see a man kind of off to the left of the screen, and he's staring at them. It's very clear that he's not part of their group. He's not with them. He's not conversing with them, but he's just kind of standing and creepily watching them. And then he ends up trying to come closer. The girls are completely oblivious. And then he kind of comes within like listening distance and then pulls his hood up. I mean, it was sus as fuck. When the police initially put out this footage and they were like, hey, yeah, we're looking for more information on this guy. I was like, shit, that's solved. Completely solved. There's no way that this creepy man who was stalking them at the food truck is not involved. But it's apparently a case of people are creepy as shit because guess what? The police cleared him. He was just creepily being a voyeur and he is not actually linked to this case. So that being said, ladies, be careful and watch your environment at all times. So far, as of right now, police have cleared that man, also one of the surviving roommates' boyfriends, and then also an unknown man named Jack. Kaylee and Madison, who apparently were the closer friends from the group, after they got home from the food truck, and again, went to the bar, went to the food truck, went home, they placed 6 calls to a friend named Jack between 2:26 a.m. and 2:24 a.m. And then Madison phoned Jack 3 times before Kaylee yet again called him one more time. Now, we do not know who Jack is. We do not know how he fits into this in any capacity, but we do know that Jack has been cleared. And that also moves up the possible time of the murders to at least likely 2:44 a.m. or after. Everyone would have been home for about an hour at that point. And the roommates on the first floor, the 2 girls, they were not injured at all. Again, they slept through the entire ordeal. They woke up that next day. They went up to the second floor. They saw that they weren't waking up. So they called some of their friends over to help them wake up the victims. Unfortunately, their roommates were dead. Second, third floor victims were all deceased. But the girls who were alive and slept through this had no idea. So at that point, their friends picked up the phone and called police. And we do know that at least one of the victims, possibly a second, tried to fight back. There have been several contradictory statements from city and county officials. And obviously, as you can imagine, this isn't making the community feel any better whatsoever. In fact, some people from the university there have left. There's about 25,000 people, and this is kind of like on the Washington state border. The university itself has 11,000 students. Because of not only the crime, but because of the conflicting statements by law enforcement, students in particular simply do not feel safe. And some of them have actually left. It took Police Chief James Fry 3 days from the killings to step back statements that he made on that day 1, saying, oh yeah, community, this is targeted. Community is not in any danger whatsoever. There was such an outcry to that because they had no idea that he actually walked it back. Then the mayor of the city told the New York Times that it was just a crime of passion. And again, the police chief has been forced to walk that back. It is just an absolute shit show and a complete exhibition of how not to treat a murder case. And I do not blame any of the students there for being upset, for being scared, for not having information, for having your law enforcement who's supposed to be there to protect you and be there for you to lie. So currently we are waiting on additional information here. And again, as of today, 11:21, Monday evening, no one has been arrested. But I will be covering this case closely as all of the information comes out. So expect in the weekly news updates that this is going to be a case that is covered. And next to last topic here, like I said, just had a couple cases to discuss here. Lori Vallow. So on November 16th, Lori Vallow was deemed competent to stand trial. If you recall, she just had a brief second foray into being found incompetent. Also, Judge Stephen Boyce on November 17th, just the day after, denied Chad Daybell's team's motion to sever the trials. His reasoning was that it's unnecessary to go over the trial 2 times with the same evidence and witnesses. And I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. I get it. I understand fully conspiracy to commit murder and so on and so forth, all the planning. Lori Vallow and Chad were both in on this from the beginning. We have seen this and lies related to it multiple times in this case. I won't rehash it, but I understand why on the top that it would make sense to have one trial, same time, same witnesses, same evidence. And then the other part of me says, this is a death penalty case. This is a case where Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow will go on trial and the death penalty is on the table. And I know a lot of you listeners are pro-death penalty. I've seen enough let her fry, kill them all, in every single group and blog and whatnot on this case. I do not believe in the death penalty personally. I think when we're talking about executing members of society, I personally believe that there should be 2 trials and that each one should be able to stand on its own feet. I understand if it's like 3 people robbing a bank. That makes sense to me. But as a citizen of the United States of America, in a death penalty case, I personally don't believe that they should be tied together. Obviously, what I think and what I want doesn't matter because it's not reality and it's not going to happen. And in Idaho, they have chosen to put them together. Judge Boyce has said that John Pryor has not met the burden of proof to require that they should be severed. Respect it. So we are going to see them tried together. If you also recall, video cameras are not going to be allowed in the courtroom. And something I learned that I found very interesting about defendants are tried together is that obviously it saves the court time and money, right? Like judicial resources. What's interesting to me is that each person's case, so like Lori and Chad's case, they don't actually have to be the exact same. You know, it's my personal belief that Lori Vallow was much aware of what Chad Daybell was doing, but I do believe that Chad Daybell took the physical action of setting it in motion or even doing it. We all know about the gunshot and the raccoon. So let's say that Chad and Lori have two very separate cases. Often in conspiracy prosecutions, each defendant may have done something different to break the law, and they may be charged with different crimes entirely. So then it's up to the criminal defense attorney to make sure that that jury understands what their client is charged with and that they are not grouped together with the other. So it did make me happy to hear that Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell are going to have their attorneys basically come to bat for them in their trials and be like, I mean, let's face it, we're all waiting for the moment that they turn on one another, right? So it's going to be up to their criminal defense attorneys to separate each one of them and say, hey, no, she did that, I did this, or she did that, or what I'm thinking is going to happen, Alex did that. It's up to them. It is really going to be fascinating. I know that I've taken a long break from the Lori Vallow case. I will 100% be covering it more often and more frequently when the trials begin. Next in that, Orsolya Gaal. I covered this case as well when it came out a couple months ago. If you recall, she was the mother who was murdered in her own home by the man who she was having an affair with. On April 16th, David Bonola went to Orsolya Gaal's home and they began arguing. He let himself into her home via a key that she had stashed under the mat. They began to argue in the kitchen. They went down into the basement. He ended up cutting her throat and stabbing her more than 50 times before stuffing her into a duffel bag. He then took this duffel bag. It was on wheels. CCTV footage caught him wheeling that duffel bag through the neighborhood, and apparently he left a whole trail of blood behind him from the home to the park in which he left the duffel bag. Someone walking their dog unfortunately came across the duffel bag, opened a corner of it, and saw a woman's leg. So again, he had been having an affair with Gaal. She was married. She had 2 teenage sons. He was arrested without incident just a couple days later, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison for this crime. I just wanted to cover that case to completion, but yes, he finally was sentenced to 25 years in prison for this murder. Stabbing a woman more than 50 times, slitting her throat, and then wheeling her out into a park to be found in public, to me, I'm like, yeah, that probably deserves more than just 25 years, but hey. Apparently her husband is very pleased with the ruling and said that it was best case scenario. And then the final thing I'd like to cover in this episode, and this hits so close to home, is the Club Q shooting in Colorado Springs. Just before midnight on Saturday, 22-year-old Anderson Lee Aldrich entered Club Q, a nightclub there in Colorado Springs, and he immediately opened fire with an AR-15, because of course it was. In just a couple minutes, he killed 5 and injured 19 others, although 25 people in total were injured, some from other injuries sustained other than gunfire. Some patrons ended up rushing him and were able to subdue him before police arrived just 5 minutes after that first call at 11:57. Murder charges have officially been filed as of today. Colorado court records show that Aldrich was charged with 5 counts of murder and 5 counts of bias-motivated crime causing bodily injury. A Colorado judge granted prosecutors' request to seal the court records related to his arrest until the conclusion of the full investigation. And that is per the New York Times. I have a lot of thoughts on this. But first, I would like to just mention probably one of the heroes from this story who no doubt saved a lot of lives in this instance. His name is Richard M. Fierro. He served 15 years in the military, and he was actually at that gay club with his wife, his daughter, his daughter's boyfriend, and then 2 of their family friends. One of his daughter's friends was a drag queen who was performing that night, and so he and his wife went to support their daughter's friend. He did an amazing interview with the New York Times. If you subscribe to the New York Times, make sure you find this article. It's an interview with him. It is absolutely incredible. I'm going to go ahead and actually read a passage from it now. At the time of the shooting, the women were dancing. He was joking with his friends, and then the shooting started. It was a staccato of flashes by the front door, the familiar sound of small arms fire. Mr. Fierro knew it too well. Without thinking, he hit the floor, pulling his friend down with him. Bullets sprayed across the bar, smashing bottles and glasses. People screamed. Mr. Fierro looked up and saw a figure as big as a bear. easily more than 300 pounds, wearing body armor and carrying a rifle a lot like the one he had carried in Iraq. The shooter was moving through the bar towards a door leading out to a patio where dozens of people had fled. The long-suppressed instincts of the platoon leader surged back to life. He raced across the room, grabbed the gunman by a handle on the back of his body armor, pulled him to the floor, and jumped on top of him. Was he shooting at the time? Was he about to shoot? I don't know, Mr. Fierro said. I just knew I had to take him down. The two crashed to the floor. The gunman's military-style rifle clattered just out of reach. Mr. Fierro started to go for it, but then saw the gunman come up with a pistol in his other hand. I grabbed the gun out of his hand and just started hitting him in the head over and over, Mr. Fierro said. As he held the man down and slammed the pistol down on his skull, Mr. Fierro started barking orders. He yelled for another club patron using a string of expletives to grab the rifle, then told the patron to start kicking the gunman in the face. A drag dancer was passing by, and Mr. Fierro said he ordered her to stomp the attacker with her high heels. The whole time, Mr. Fierro said, he kept pummeling the shooter with the pistol while screaming obscenities. When police arrived a few minutes later, the gunman was no longer struggling. Mr. Fierro said that he had feared that he had killed him. He was covered in blood. He got up and frantically lurched around in the dark looking for his family. He spotted his friends on the floor. One had been shot several times in the chest and arm. Another had been shot in the leg. He spied his wife and daughter on the edge of the room and was about to go to them when he was tackled. Officers rushing to the chaotic scene had spotted a blood-spattered man with a handgun, not knowing if he was the threat. They put him in handcuffs and locked him in the back of the police car for what seemed like more than an hour. He said he screamed and pleaded to be let go so that he could see his family. Eventually, he was freed. He went to the hospital with his wife and daughter, who had only minor injuries. His friends were there and are still there in much more serious condition. They were all alive, but his daughter's boyfriend was nowhere to be found. In the chaos, they had lost him. They drove back to the club searching for him. They circled familiar streets, hoping they would find him walking home, but there was nothing. The family got a call late Sunday from his mother. He had died in the shooting. When Mr. Fierro heard, he held his daughter and cried. From what we know now, the shooter had an AR-15, multiple magazines, and also a pistol with additional rounds. I can't even imagine how many lives this man saved by jumping into action, following through with his training, jumping into action, and tackling this man. I've covered multiple mass shootings on this podcast, multiple because it happens so frequently in this country. In so many of these cases, we had some semblance of idea that something wasn't right? So in this one, it's just like the others. Anderson Aldrich was known to be unstable. So unstable, in fact, that last year in 2021, his mother actually bought him a ghillie suit. Like, you know, the big outfits that snipers wear with the long, dangly, like camo pieces to fit in and camo out, a ghillie suit. His mother actually bought him a ghillie suit for his birthday. He ended up taking his mother hostage at gunpoint, put a gun to her head, and threatened to kill her also with a homemade bomb that he just happened to have. 10 homes in the neighborhood had to be evacuated, and there was a 3.5-hour standoff, almost a 4-hour standoff with police before he was arrested. And after all of that, his mother, Laura Vopel, still posted in her local community Facebook group, the Sisters of Colorado Springs, and asked people, she said the following: "Hello, sisters. Does anyone know of a fantastic defense attorney? I ask this with a heavy heart, but my family really needs some help at this time. We have cash to retain good counsel. Thank you." After all of that, she still arranged and paid for his attorney. He would probably still be in prison if she actually didn't use the family's money to bail him out of that entire situation. And I say family money because whereas they don't appear to be incredibly affluent, his grandfather is actually a Republican state representative in California. He was in the news. A lot of reps from the California state legislature actually wanted him to step down because he compared the January 6th insurrection to the American Revolution. Sorry, dude, domestic terrorism. And based on an article in the Colorado Springs Gazette, they reported that the district attorney's office did not file formal charges. Formal charges were not pursued in this case. And records show that he was able to purchase an AR-15 style rifle as well as a handgun, the two weapons that he took into Club Q to kill people with. He was able to purchase these weapons after he held his mother hostage, threatened to kill her, had a homemade bomb, and wearing tactical gear. He was then able, because the district attorney did not pursue charges, to purchase additional weapons and fly through clean as a whistle in background checks because the case was never adjudicated. The charges were dropped and all of the records were sealed. Why were the records sealed, you might ask? I have a feeling that Grandpa pulled a favor. Obviously, that's pure speculation on my part, but I mean, let's be honest here. Not only did his mother hire an attorney and assist him out of the situation, this entire case also puts a spotlight on Colorado's red flag law. And this is highly controversial, especially on the side of gun rights activists, which why? I don't even freaking know. It seems common sense to me. What the red flag law is basically it allows a judge to prevent someone who's in crisis, who's having a mental health crisis, from accessing firearms through a court order. That can generally be triggered by the individual's family, a member of their household, or, say, a police officer. That is a new law. So if someone is out there losing their shit, say, taking someone hostage, threatening to kill them, have homemade weapons, a member of the family or law enforcement can trigger this law, basically, into preventing them from having access to firearms. Typically, from what I've seen in other red flag type laws, the firearms, if there are any in the home that belong to this person, they are taken. And then once that person is no longer deemed a threat, they are returned to them. This is not permanent. It is not intended to keep them from ever purchasing firearms. It is quite literally meant to ensure that a person in crisis does not have access to firearms. Why wasn't this law triggered at that time? Lots and lots and lots and lots of questions here. In these types of stories, in the Pulse nightclub shooting, it hits close to home. As a member of the LGBT community, watching interviews with witnesses and people who were there in Club Q, also who were there for the Pulse nightclub shooting, one thing is said over and over and over again, and that's, I don't have a safe space. I don't feel safe. That was our place. Where do we go now? And I'm seeing a lot of comments online of, well, why do you need a safe space? Why do you need a safe space? And I can tell you why. Places like Colorado Springs, which are incredibly conservative, right? Focus on the family is there. Club Q was the only gay-themed nightclub / bar in the area. Even though we have gay marriage in this country, and even though the public sentiment on, gay rights has changed considerably over the last 10 years, 15 years even, it's still kind of dicey in some areas. I was born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm just going to TMI it all the way out there, guys. I realized that I was gay, 13, 14 years old. I fully came into who I was as a young teenager. My family was never accepting, ever. I went to a Christian private school, so definitely not going to get any support there. And I spent my teenage years just longing to get out of there and into an accepting environment. When I was 16, I got my first girlfriend. Obviously, it was secret. Somehow, some classmate saw me out downtown, whatever, thought that I looked a little bit too chummy with the girl, and reported it back to my school. I believe I was a sophomore at that point, and I remember being called into the guidance counselor's office, and she asked me, she said, someone reported that they saw you behaving in a way that does not align with the morals of the school. So is that true? Are you gay? And of course I denied. I don't know what you're talking about. No, absolutely not. That's, no. And direct quote, good, because we don't need that kind of filth at this school. So that left an impression. My parents found a little note from my girlfriend at the time, and they ended up grounding me. My parents said, hey, which one of your friends, because I was a sophomore, had a lot of senior friends. For some reason, my parents didn't believe that to be a huge age gap. Which one of them, is touching you? Why are you this way? So I was consistently grounded throughout high school because my parents were afraid that I was gay. So no support there whatsoever. I graduated high school in 2002, and I distinctly remember everywhere in Nashville, there were billboards, anti-gay billboards. Find Jesus. This is a sin. Being gay is a sin. And then also, if you recall, George W. Bush ran on God, gays, and guns. Very much anti-gay, no gay marriage, blah, 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 blah. Protect the traditional family. So as a child, I had no support at home. I had nowhere to go. I went to a private school that more so hated me after that rumor got circulated. The everyday people here, solidly conservative, very much anti-gay at that time, very little tolerance. Nashville has changed tremendously since then. I had nowhere and nothing, nowhere to turn. I ended up going to college in Ohio at Antioch College. My desire to belong was so strong that I picked a small liberal arts school in like a very liberal pocket of Yellow Springs, Ohio, because I wanted to be accepted more than anything. More than anything in this world, I wanted to be accepted. And I eventually started dating a girl in college. And the very first time we went to a gay bar, the very first gay bar I ever went in, she tried to hold my hand and I flipped out. I had a visceral reaction to it. And that reaction was fear, because I had been taught that nowhere was safe, that I was not wanted, that I was some sort of freak, some sort of degenerate. And even though I didn't believe it, and even though I knew that it was largely because of the area that I was living in, it still becomes ingrained in you. And that is something that so many members of the LGBTQ plus community that they experience. Not everyone lives in New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, or big meccas where you have all sorts of melting pot and diversity and acceptance. Not everyone lives in places like that. So a gay bar, a gay club, somewhere where you can go and know that you'll be accepted for who you are and who you love is so incredibly important. It's so incredibly important. It may be 2022 and a lot of us may be more forward thinking now. However, it's not necessarily the case in a lot of places in America. So to have your little oasis of peace and acceptance and happiness, a place where you can walk through the door and not be scared, to hold someone's hand. I literally thought that I was going to be murdered if someone in Nashville, when I was young, saw me hold another girl's hand. Like, I actually feared for my personal and physical safety. And there are so many other instances when you look at interviews, whether it's Club Q, Pulse, wherever, where the witnesses say, this is where I felt safe. This is my community. This is where I felt safe, where my family and friends were. That's why, is because we share that common experience. And I've covered so many mass shootings on this podcast because there's one literally every other day in this country, technically almost every day, but let's just go ahead and not be dramatic and say every other day. It's almost always the same. The suspect had more red flags than a Soviet parade. Nothing was done. They had mental health issues that were not addressed. And they had unfettered access to purchasing guns, weapons, which is almost always 99.9999999% of the time an AR-15. So flag this, yet again, as what the fuck are we going to do about any of these issues in America? Hate, mental health, education, access to weapons, gun control. I have absolutely no idea. What I do know is that there are over 300 anti-LGBT bills in state legislatures right now. Everything from Florida's Don't Say Gay to banning any books that have gay characters in them even, or written by LGBT authors or that discuss LGBT issues. And then my favorite, and the most ridiculous, is this kerfluffle surrounding drag queens. And that is absolutely ridiculous. I would much rather have a child. I would trust a drag queen before I trusted a priest. I'm so sorry, but it is fact. But sure, let's go ahead and ban them. Here in Nashville right now, we actually have a bill that was introduced to the state Senate that would actually make drag shows illegal, except for basically 21 and up, like nightclub adult venues. Drag shows, literally men, typically, who dress like women and then come out and sing and dance, lip sync. That's apparently so offensive, even though drag has been a thing since King Dawn of Time, and even in early cinema, men used to play women's roles. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. All of the fear-mongering at random over drag queen story hours, and oh god, I'm not even going to get on my soapbox about it. It's just absolutely absurd. But all of these things contribute to the hate and sentiment that result in things like this. Racism and hate speech and the fear-mongering of people of color lead to top supermarket shootings and things like that. Hate has no part in our society in any form or fashion. I don't know, this one just made me incredibly sad because not only did innocent people lose their lives senselessly and horrifically, But all of the other survivors now lost their safe place. And in many instances, as you can see in the interviews, the one place they felt like they had family. And then the best part is knowing that nothing is going to be done to address any of this in this country because of the political climate. It's just disgusting. But my final closing thought on the Club Q shooting is that it took an Iraq war veteran, a drag queen, and a random patron, all three unarmed. They were able to accomplish what hundreds of armed, tactical Uvalde police could not do. And that is the most mind-blowing aspect of all of this to me. We truly have our priorities so fucking backwards in this country. But thank you so much for listening, guys. Again, Friday, the next episode is going to be the part 2 of The Dark Side of Disney. And as soon as that probable cause affidavit drops in the Delphi Murders case, I will be putting out an episode same day to go over that. Again, you're listening to We Saw the Devil. This is Robin. Check us out at wesawthedevil.com. Check us out across all social media. And if you're liking the show, loving it, please leave a 5-star review or consider backing us on Patreon. I hope all of you listeners have a wonderful, safe Thanksgiving that is filled with so much love. Until next crime.